Under the fading sunset, Matthew Evans, a millionaire in his 70s, sat in his luxury car by the side of the deserted road. His face was marked with weariness, his eyes hiding the traces of time, with deep wrinkles etched across his forehead. He sighed, looking down at the flat tire, powerless against a situation he never thought he would find himself in. Matthew pulled out his phone, his trembling fingers swiping across the screen to call for roadside assistance. But the signal was weak, and the call could not connect. He tried again, still hopeless. The wind began to blow colder, carrying with it the dampness of the night that was about to descend. He tightened his suit jacket and looked down the long, desolate road, where the few passing car lights offered no sign of help. For someone who had once owned everything: money, power, lavish parties, this moment made him feel strangely empty. He realized that no matter how much money was in his account or how many people surrounded him in times of success, at this moment, he was just an old man alone, stranded on an unfamiliar road with no one to help. Memories suddenly flooded back, evoking a strange feeling within him. This was not the first time he had felt loneliness, but it was the first time that loneliness made him feel afraid. Then, amid the darkness slowly enveloping him, a headlight from afar shone through, cutting through the silence. A car was approaching. Matthew looked up as the headlights flashed brightly in the darkness. But instead of a tow truck or a polite driver stepping out, he saw a scrawny boy, about 13 or 14 years old, slowly walking toward him. Under the dim streetlight, the boy wore a faded old t-shirt and sneakers so torn they were almost unrecognizable. The boy stopped beside the car, his eyes showing a mix of curiosity and slight hesitation as he looked at the elderly man helplessly sitting in the luxury vehicle. After a brief pause, the boy spoke. "Do you need help, sir?" Matthew was momentarily stunned. For all these years, he had always been the one to help others, but now, a nameless boy, dressed in old clothes, was extending a hand to him. "Do you know how to change a tire?" he asked, his voice hoarse. The boy didn't answer right away, only nodding silently before quickly crouching down and sliding his hand under the car to check the condition. His movements were decisive, skilled enough to surprise Matthew. Without needing instructions, the boy swiftly retrieved the tool kit from the trunk and began working with astonishing confidence. The streetlights cast shadows on the boy's dirt-smeared face, sweat beading on his forehead, but his hands kept moving deftly, twisting each bolt with no sign of hesitation or uncertainty. Matthew sat still, observing, and a strange feeling welled up inside him. A street child, clearly with nothing to his name, was helping a millionaire like him selflessly, without expecting a penny in return. Only a few minutes later, the boy stood up, brushed his hands off, and gave a slight smile. "It's done, sir." Matthew looked at the boy, an indescribable emotion rising in him. He didn't know what to say, but in that brief moment, it felt as if his world and the boy's small world had suddenly intersected, as if fate had already decided it beforehand. And then, he realized he couldn't let the boy leave without asking him something. Matthew looked at the boy, his heart filled with gratitude mixed with curiosity. A child, with a scruffy appearance, in the cold late night, was willing to help a stranger without asking for anything in return. He took out his wallet, pulled out a bill, and extended it toward the boy. "You've helped me. Take this money as a thank you." The boy briefly glanced at the money in Matthew's hand, but instead of eagerly taking it as he expected, the boy just shook his head and smiled kindly. "I don't need it, sir. I'm just happy to help you." With that, the boy tucked his small hands into his jacket pockets and stepped back a little, as if to distance himself from the offer. His eyes were clear, with no trace of greed or calculation. It was simply pure kindness, a thing that Matthew had long forgotten in a world full of contracts, numbers, and exchanges. He stood there, his hand still holding the money he hadn't yet put away, silently watching the small figure disappear into the darkness. The boy didn't turn around, walking away gently as if what had just happened was nothing more than an ordinary event in life. But for Matthew, that moment lingered in his mind. A wealthy man like him, someone who had been accustomed to huge profits and people who always placed their interests first, had unexpectedly been taught a profound lesson in kindness by a nameless boy. He got into the car, started the engine, but his hand on the steering wheel trembled slightly. His eyes glanced through the rearview mirror, almost as if he were hoping to see the boy's figure again. But out there, the street was quiet, with only the dim lights casting shadows on the cold road. Throughout the drive home, the image of the boy never left his mind. Who was he? Why was he wandering alone in the middle of the night like that? And why, in a society full of calculations, did that boy still retain such extraordinary innocence? Matthew didn't know, but he clearly felt one thing. This brief encounter was perhaps not just a mere coincidence. That whole night, Matthew tossed and turned, unable to sleep. In his mind, the image of the boy with the sincere smile and dirty hands haunted him. How did such a child live? What was his family like? And why, in a world full of calculations, was he so generous? The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the window, Matthew left his house with a clear determination. He had to find that boy. He drove back to the road where he had been stranded the night before, stopping in front of small restaurants and roadside repair shops, asking everyone he could. Most of them just shook their heads, unaware of the boy he was looking for. But then, at a small grocery store, an elderly woman with kind eyes suddenly recognized his description. Elijah. That boy lives with his mother in Harlan, about 10 miles away. A good child, always willing to help others. The name Elijah was etched deeply in Matthew's mind. He repeated it to himself several times, feeling as if he had just found an important piece he had unconsciously been searching for all along. Without hesitation, Matthew turned his car around and headed toward the town of Harlan. A strange feeling crept into his heart, not just gratitude toward the boy, but a strong urge, as if he and Elijah shared an unexplored connection yet to be revealed. Matthew's car stopped in front of a small house nestled beside a line of green trees. It wasn't a luxurious mansion, nor was it a grand house, but simply a modest home with old wooden walls. Yet, as soon as he stepped out of the car, Matthew felt a strange warmth emanating from the place, a feeling he had rarely found in his own extravagant homes over the years. He hesitated for a moment before approaching the door. He wasn't sure what he would say, but his heart urged him to press the doorbell. The door creaked open, and a woman appeared. She was in her 40s, with kind eyes and a face that looked somewhat weary, yet still maintained a gentle softness. "Hello, I'm Matthew Evans. Yesterday, your son helped me change a flat tire on the road. I'm here to thank him." The woman was surprised for a moment, then smiled. "So you're the person Elijah mentioned last night. Please, come in." Matthew stepped through the wooden door, revealing a simple yet tidy space inside. In this small house, everything was modest, yet there was a warmth that felt strangely comforting. She sat down in a chair, poured him a cup of hot tea, and gently said, "Elijah is always like that. He loves to help others. Even though we don't have much, he's never hesitated to share whatever he has." Looking around the small house, Matthew could see that their life was not easy. But what moved him the most wasn't the lack of material things, but the look in the mother's eyes, a look full of love and pride as she spoke about her son. Matthew sat there, listening to her share stories about Elijah, and within him rose a strange feeling, a deep respect for this boy. Perhaps this meeting was not just a mere coincidence. Elijah walked into the room with a bright smile, but when he saw Matthew, he was momentarily surprised. "You're the person from yesterday," he exclaimed, his eyes lighting up with surprise. Matthew smiled and nodded. "That's right, I'm here to thank you. Yesterday, if it weren't for you, I don't know what I would have done." Elijah shook his head and laughed, his voice calm. "I just did what was right, sir. If I see someone who needs help and I can do something, I will. It's not to receive anything in return, but just because it's the right thing to do." Those simple words made Matthew pause. He looked at the boy in front of him, only 13 or 14, living in difficult circumstances, yet possessing a heart of generosity, larger than anyone he had ever met. Matthew remained silent for a long while. In his mind, distant memories suddenly flooded back, the image of the young Matthew from decades ago, who had also grown up in poverty, who had known what it was like to struggle. When he was young, he too had helped others without expecting anything in return. But over time, money, fame, and success had changed him. The more successful he became, the further he drifted from the core values he once held dear. Matthew looked at Elijah, then around the small house, a modest place, yet filled with warmth. This boy may be poor in material things, but he was rich in a way that Matthew had long since lost. For the first time in many years, Matthew felt something stir within him, a sense of regret, a sense of awakening. Could this be the lesson that life was trying to remind him of? Looking at the small, simple house overflowing with the love between Elijah and his mother, Matthew felt his heart grow heavy. He realized that amid his world of luxury and wealth, he had forgotten the warmth of a true home. The next morning, upon returning to the town of Harlan, Matthew made a decision. He would do something to help Elijah and his mother, not out of pity, but because the boy had awakened in him values he had long forgotten. Matthew started by hiring a team of workers to repair the house. The old, worn-out walls, the leaky roof, the rotting wooden floors, everything was replaced. He didn't tell Elijah or his mother about his plan. He simply carried it out in silence. The next day, when the mother and son returned, they were stunned to see their home almost completely renovated. The new roof stood firm, the walls were freshly painted, the front yard was neatly cleaned, and the windows gleamed under the morning sun. Elijah widened his eyes in amazement. What happened here? Matthew simply smiled, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. I just did the right thing. But he didn't stop there. He furnished the house with new furniture, making the small home feel warmer and cozier. A new table and chairs for the living room, a soft and comfortable bed for both Elijah and his mother, and even a brand new stove so she could cook better meals. Elijah's mother was moved to tears. You didn't have to do this. We can't possibly accept all of this. Matthew gently replied, think of it as a thank you. Elijah reminded me of what truly matters in life. Elijah gazed at Matthew in silence. And in that moment, between two people from entirely different worlds, a profound bond was formed, not through money or charity, but through genuine kindness that came from the heart. In the days that followed, as the carpenters and workers continued to renovate the house, Elijah couldn't hide his curiosity. He stood nearby, watching every movement of the skilled craftsmen, how they measured, cut wood, hammered nails, and carefully assembled each piece together. One of the carpenters noticed the boy's fascination and smiled. Hey, kid, want to give it a try? Elijah's eyes widened, and he eagerly nodded. The carpenter handed him a small hammer and guided him on how to drive in a nail properly firmly, without bending it. At first, Elijah was a bit clumsy, but after a few tries, he got the hang of it. From a distance, Matthew quietly observed the boy. In Elijah's eyes, there was a genuine passion and excitement that even the boy himself might not have realized before. He wasn't just helping, he was learning, bit by bit, about building a sturdy roof, about patience and precision in every detail. As the days passed, Elijah grew more attached to the work. He listened to the workers' instructions, practiced using a saw, learned to smooth out wood, and even helped measure and fit small wooden panels. It was no longer just curiosity, a passion was beginning to take root in the boy's heart. Matthew saw his younger self in Elijah's bright, eager eyes. Before becoming a millionaire, he had once been an ambitious young man, longing to build something meaningful. But life had swept him away, and success and wealth had made him forget the simple, yet most important things. Now, watching Elijah immerse himself in every saw stroke, every hammer strike, Matthew realized he wasn't just helping a family have a better life, he had helped a boy discover his path. A slow smile formed on his face. This was what truly mattered. On the day the house renovation was completed, the air was filled with joy and warmth. The once humble home now had a brand new appearance, freshly painted bright walls, a sturdy roof, and neatly arranged, more comfortable furniture. It was not just a transformation in material things, but also in spirit, as if the light of hope had truly stepped into this small family's life. The neighbors, always friendly and close-knit, gathered to celebrate. They brought simple gifts, a basket of freshly baked pastries, a vase of wildflowers picked from their gardens, ripe fruits from their own trees. Laughter filled the air, and heartfelt blessings were exchanged, making the home feel even warmer. Elijah beamed with joy as people admired what he had learned during the renovation. He proudly showed everyone a small wooden shelf he had built for the living room, his tiny hands gently running over the smooth surface, his eyes sparkling with happiness. Matthew stood beside him, silently watching. He was no longer the wealthy man sitting in a luxurious office, calculating cold numbers. Today, he was simply a man experiencing the joy of sharing, of helping those who needed him. A sense of peace crept into his soul. It had been a long time since he had felt such a simple, yet profound happiness, a joy that did not come from money or success, but from the genuine connection between human beings. As time passed, Elijah became more and more passionate about construction. He spent hours with wooden planks, learning how to measure, cut, and assemble pieces that seemed simple, yet carried deep meaning. He was no longer just a child helping out with his small hands now. He had a dream, a path to follow. Matthew continued to return to the small town of Harlan, no longer as a wealthy millionaire, but as a member of the family. He would sit with Elijah and his mother on the porch in the late afternoons, sipping warm tea, listening to their daily stories, and embracing the peace he had long been searching for. Elijah still had the habit of helping those around him, but now he had the skills to do it even better. He repaired roofs for neighbors, built bookshelves for the school, and dreamed of the day he could construct even greater things, not just with his hands, but with his heart. Matthew looked at the boy with pride in his eyes. He realized that true wealth was not in the numbers in a bank account, but in the impact one leaves on the lives of others. One late afternoon, as he stood on the small road leading out of town, gazing back at the warm home behind him, he smiled. Life is a circle, and sometimes a single small act can change everything. And it was a lesson he would never forget. Life is not about what we have, but what we give.